I never thought I would find myself in this position, standing on the precipice of betrayal. It was a Friday night, the kind of night when the city comes alive, and the pulse of the nightlife thrums through the streets. I had just come home from a long week at work, eager to spend some quality time with my wife, Laura. We had plans to hit our favorite restaurant, a small Italian place that felt like an extension of our home. But as I turned the key in the lock, I felt an unsettling chill in the air, something I couldn't quite place. The moment I stepped inside, the silence was deafening. I called out for her, but there was no response. I walked through the dimly lit living room, the soft glow of the lamp casting long shadows. My heart raced. Something felt off. That's when I noticed her phone lying on the kitchen counter, screen lit up, and a message flashing from an unfamiliar number. Curiosity got the better of me and I picked it up. I shouldn't have. But the words pierced through me like a dagger. Can't wait to see you tonight. Same place. In an instant, the world around me blurred. The restaurant, the laughter, the warmth of her smile, all of it faded into a hollow echo. My mind raced as I recalled the nights she had spent out with friends. The betrayal sank in like a lead weight in my stomach. Laura had been unfaithful with a club bouncer, no less. I felt a mix of anger and confusion. A bouncer, how could she? The image of her with him, strong, rugged, and probably charming, was unbearable. I had always prided myself on being a good husband, yet here I was, blindsided by the very person I trusted most. Suddenly, all the moments we shared felt tainted. The laughter, the quiet evenings, the dreams we built together, everything was now a facade. I dropped the phone back onto the counter, my hands trembling. I was furious, but more than that, I was devastated. The betrayal clawed at my insides, leaving me feeling hollow. I had always believed that love was a fortress, impervious to the outside world. But it seemed that I had left the gates wide open. As I paced the room, I felt a surge of emotions: betrayal, sadness, and an urge for revenge. My mind raced with possibilities. What would I do? Confront her? I wasn't sure if I had the strength to face her yet, not when my heart felt so shattered. Instead, I resolved to gather my thoughts, to understand what had happened before I acted. I knew I had connections. My work in the security sector had introduced me to people who could help. I had always been a man of resources and influence, but I had never imagined I would need to wield them in this way. The thought of retaliation began to take root in my mind, feeding off my anger and pain. I didn't want to just confront her lover. I wanted to make him pay for what he had done. As I sat on the edge of the couch, I felt the weight of my decision pressing down on me. Was this the right path? I had always believed in communication and resolution, not retribution. But the thought of him, this stranger, taking my wife from me ignited a fire I couldn't extinguish. I had to act not just for myself but for my dignity. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my racing heart. I needed to think clearly. I needed a plan. But as I contemplated my next move, I was left with questions that gnawed at me. Was I capable of revenge? Would it make me feel better or simply deepen the chasm of pain? For now, I had to focus. I would find out everything I could about this bouncer. I would make him understand the consequences of his actions. As the night wore on, I found myself in a haze, grappling with the raw emotions swirling inside me. The initial shock had morphed into a burning desire for justice. I took a seat at my desk, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the scattered papers and photographs that chronicled my life with Laura. There were pictures of our wedding day, vacations, and the mundane moments that felt so precious at the time. Each image felt like a cruel reminder of the trust that had been shattered. I knew I needed more information. Who was this bouncer? His name was probably just a whisper on Laura's lips, but to me, he was an intruder, a thief who had stolen something irreplaceable. I pulled out my phone and began searching for the club she frequented. It was a popular spot downtown, a place I had avoided due to its reputation. I had always preferred quieter bars, where the music didn't drown out conversation and the drinks didn't come with a side of temptation. After a few minutes of digging, I found the club's website. The neon lights flashed in my mind, and I could almost hear the thumping bass of the music. I scrolled through the staff page until I found him. Jake. A face that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover, muscles bulging under a fitted shirt, and a confident grin that probably charmed every woman who walked through the door. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. How could Laura be drawn to him? I took a moment to compose myself. I wasn't going to let jealousy cloud my judgment. Instead, I focused on my connections. I had built a network of contacts over the years, people who could help me gather intel on Jake. I picked up my phone and dialed Tony, an old friend from the security business who had connections in the nightlife scene. "Tony, it's me," I said when he picked up. "I need a favor." "Sure, what's up?" he replied, his tone casual. "I need to know about a bouncer at the Pulse, Jake. Can you dig anything up for me?" There was a pause on the other end. "You in some trouble? Just need to know more about him." "Personal reasons," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "All right, I'll see what I can do. Just keep your head cool, man." I hung up, my heart racing. I was stepping into a dark territory, but I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I had the resources to make this man's life complicated. I would turn the tables on him, show him that he couldn't just walk into my life and disrupt everything I had built. The next day, I received a message from Tony. He had managed to gather some information. Jake was known for his aggressive behavior, and he had a reputation for getting into fights outside the club. He had a history of trouble, but he was also well liked by the management. It seemed he had some protection in the club world, which made my plan a bit more complex. I felt a mix of relief and frustration. On one hand, Jake was not the untouchable figure I had imagined. On the other, it meant I had to tread carefully. I couldn't just storm in and expect to dismantle his life without repercussions. I needed a strategy, one that would ensure he couldn't come near Laura again. As I sat in my office, I began to sketch out a plan. I would leverage Jake's connections against him. I knew the club was a hub for various unsavory characters, and if I could plant the right seeds of doubt, I could make Jake's life difficult. I would start by reaching out to a few of my contacts, people who could sway opinions and create friction. But there was a nagging feeling in the back of my mind. Was I becoming the villain in my own story? I had always prided myself on being a good man, someone who believed in justice and fairness. Yet here I was, plotting revenge. I pushed the thought aside. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my dignity and protecting what was mine. Days passed as I formulated my plan. I reached out to a couple of acquaintances in the local security industry who had dealt with the club before. I painted a picture of Jake as a liability, someone who could bring unwanted attention to the establishment. I crafted my narrative carefully, ensuring that it didn't seem personal, just business. As I worked, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal that lingered in my chest. I thought of Laura, her laughter, her warmth. Did she ever truly love me, or was it all a lie? I felt like a stranger in my own life, and the weight of my actions loomed over me. But I was committed now. There was no turning back. I had to see this through. With my plan taking shape, I felt a strange mix of anticipation and dread. Every call I made, every piece of information I gathered, felt like both a step towards reclaiming my dignity and a descent into a darker side of myself. I was no longer just a husband betrayed. I was a man on a mission, fueled by anger and a desire for retribution. The following week, I received a call from one of my contacts, a man named Rick who had once worked security at the Pulse. He had a reputation for being the guy who knew everyone and everything that went on behind the scenes. I had reached out to him, hoping he could shed some light on Jake's dealings and any vulnerabilities I could exploit. "Listen, Rick," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I need you to tell me about Jake. What's his deal? Any weaknesses I can work with?" Rick chuckled softly, a sound that sent a shiver down my spine. "You're looking to take him down a peg, huh? That guy got a solid reputation, but I've seen him step out of line before. He's got a temper and he's made some enemies. Just keep your distance, all right?" I felt a surge of hope. Jake wasn't the invincible figure I had imagined. He had flaws that could be exploited. "What kind of enemies?" I pressed, eager to gather more intel. "Let's just say he's had a few run-ins that didn't end well for him. A couple of guys from the neighborhood don't like him much, and there's talk about him being involved in some shady dealings. You might want to play that angle." An idea began to form. In my mind, I could create a narrative that painted Jake as a liability to the club, someone whose presence could bring unwanted attention. I would make sure the management started to question his reliability, sowing seeds of doubt that could lead to his downfall. As I hung up, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was finally taking control, but with that rush came a wave of guilt. What would this do to Laura? Would she suffer because of my actions? I pushed the thought away. She had made her choice, and now it was time for me to make mine. The following weekend, I made my way to the Pulse, determined to gather first-hand information. I donned a casual outfit, hopping to blend in with the crowd. The club was buzzing with energy, the bass thumping through the walls and the air thick with anticipation. As I navigated through the throngs of people, I spotted Jake at the entrance, his imposing figure scanning the crowd. He looked confident, and I felt a surge of anger at the sight of him. I made my way to the bar, ordering a drink and keeping a close eye on Jake. I needed to understand how he operated, how he interacted with the staff and the patrons. I watched as he flirted with a group of women, his charm seemingly effortless. It made my blood boil. How could Laura be drawn to this man? As the night wore on, I struck up a conversation with a bartender named Mia, someone who had been working at the club for a while. She was friendly, and after a few drinks I felt comfortable enough to steer the conversation towards Jake. "Hey, what's the deal with that bouncer, Jake?" I asked casually, trying to sound disinterested. Mia rolled her eyes. "He's a piece of work. He can be a real jerk sometimes. He's got a temper, and I've seen him throw people out for the smallest things. But the management loves him because he keeps the peace." I nodded, taking mental notes. "Has he ever had any issues with other people? Any enemies?" She hesitated, glancing around to ensure no one was eavesdropping. "Yeah, he's had some run-ins with guys from the neighborhood. There was this one guy he kicked out last month, and I heard there's been talk of retaliation. It's not the first time he's had trouble." A wave of excitement coursed through me. This was the angle I needed. I could leverage Jake's temper and his enemies to create a narrative that would undermine him in the eyes of the club management. If I could convince them that he was a liability, they would have no choice but to take action. As the night progressed, I gathered more information, piecing together a picture of Jake's life that was far from the perfect facade he presented. I left the club that night with a sense of purpose, knowing I was one step closer to enacting my revenge. But as I drove home, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that settled in my stomach. I was playing a dangerous game, and I was aware that the consequences could ripple beyond just Jake. What would happen if Laura found out what I was doing? Would she see me as the villain in this story? I tried to push those thoughts aside. I had to stay focused on my goal. I was reclaiming my dignity, protecting my family from this man who had invaded our lives. But deep down, I knew. I was also wrestling with a part of myself that I had never wanted to confront, the part that craved vengeance, that wanted to see Jake pay for the pain he had caused. The next step was clear. I needed to start planting the seeds of doubt. I would make sure that Jake's reputation began to tarnish, that the management would question his reliability. And with each step I took, I felt both empowered and terrified. With my plan in motion, I felt an unsettling mix of excitement and anxiety. I was determined to dismantle Jake's carefully constructed reputation, but the weight of my actions loomed over me like a storm cloud. I spent the next few days strategizing, thinking of ways to subtly influence the perceptions of those who held power over Jake at the club. I decided to reach out to Tony again. He had mentioned knowing a few people who were connected to the management of the Pulse, and I needed to leverage that connection. I called him, my heart racing as I prepared to lay my cards on the table. "Hey, Tony," I said, trying to sound casual. "I need to talk to you about Jake." "Again? Still on that, huh?" he replied, a hint of amusement in his voice. "What's your angle? I'm thinking we can plant some seeds of doubt about him. Make it seem like he's more trouble than he's worth. Any way you can help." Tony paused for a moment. "I can talk to a couple of guys who run in the same circles. If they hear anything negative, it'll get back to the management, but you need to be careful. This kind of thing can backfire." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I understand. I just want to make sure he's not around my wife anymore. He's a bad influence. All right, I'll see what I can do. Just keep your head cool, man. After our call, I felt a rush of adrenaline. I was finally taking control of the situation. But as I prepared to execute my plan, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was losing sight of the bigger picture. I was so consumed by revenge that I was neglecting the emotional fallout that would inevitably follow. What would happen when Laura discovered what I was doing? The next night, I returned to the Pulse, this time armed with a different strategy. I needed to observe Jake more closely to see how he interacted with the management and the patrons. I settled at the bar, nursing a drink while keeping my eyes peeled for any signs of weakness. As the night progressed, I noticed Jake's interactions with the staff. He was charming and charismatic, but there was an underlying tension in his demeanor. He snapped at a couple of patrons who got too rowdy, his temper flaring for all to see. I took mental notes, knowing that his volatile nature could be the key to tarnishing his reputation. I approached Mia again, feigning casual interest. "Hey, how's it going with Jake? He seems a bit on edge tonight." She shrugged, glancing over at him. "Yeah, he's been like that lately. I think he's got some issues outside of work. You hear the whispers, you know." "Whispers?" I prodded, eager to gather more intel. "Just rumors about him being involved in something shady. There's talk about some guys wanting to confront him about a fight he had a few weeks back. It's not good for business, and the management knows it." A wave of satisfaction washed over me. This was the angle I could exploit. I needed to ensure that the management would hear about Jake's volatile behavior and the potential threats he posed. I made a mental note to follow up with Tony to see if he could spread the rumors further. As I left the club that night, I felt a sense of purpose coursing through me. I was no longer just a husband betrayed. I was a man taking action, reclaiming my life. But the closer I got to executing my plan, the more I felt the weight of my decisions. I was playing with fire, and I knew it. Days turned into nights as I continued to work on my strategy. I reached out to various contacts, subtly dropping hints about Jake's temper and the rumors surrounding him. I made sure to frame it as concern for the club's reputation, emphasizing that a bouncer with such a history could bring unwanted attention. Eventually, I heard back from Tony. "You're on the right track, man. A couple of guys are starting to talk. If the management catches wind, they'll take it." Seriously, I felt a surge of vindication. The pieces were falling into place, but as I prepared for the final push, I realized that I was standing at a crossroads. I could continue down this path of revenge, but at what cost? I was risking everything: my marriage, my integrity, and my sense of self. The night before I planned to confront the management, I decided to take a step back. I needed to reflect on my motivations. Was I doing this to protect my dignity, or was I simply consumed by anger? I thought about Laura, the woman I had loved and shared my life with. The memories of our laughter, our dreams, and our moments of tenderness flooded my mind. I picked up my phone and stared at it, contemplating whether to call her. But I hesitated. How could I face her after everything? I was on the verge of becoming someone I didn't recognize, a man driven by revenge instead of reason. As I lay in bed that night, I realized that I had to confront her. I needed to understand her side of the story, to hear her truth before I took any further steps. I had to know if there was a shred of hope left in our relationship, or if I was simply chasing shadows. The next morning, I resolved to talk to Laura. I would confront her about the affair, but I would also lay bare my feelings, the anger, the hurt, and the confusion. I needed to know if there was a way to salvage what we had, or if I was destined to continue down this dark path of revenge. But first, I needed to gather my thoughts. I had to be prepared for whatever she might say. As I sat at the kitchen table, the morning light streaming through the window, I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Today was the day I would confront Laura. I had spent sleepless nights tossing and turning, the weight of my decision pressing heavily on my chest. The affair had turned my world upside down, and I needed answers. I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma filling the air, but it did little to calm my nerves. I could hear her moving around in the bedroom, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing within me. I wanted to approach this conversation with clarity, but Anger and betrayal simmered just beneath the surface. Finally, I took a deep breath and called out to her. "Laura, can we talk?" She emerged from the bedroom, her hair tousled and her eyes still heavy with sleep. "Sure, what's up?" she asked, her voice soft but laced with a hint of apprehension. I gestured for her to sit down, and as she took her place across the table from me, I felt my heart race. "I found something the other night," I began, my voice steady but firm. "Your phone, the messages." Her expression shifted, the color draining from her face. "You read my messages." "I did." I couldn't hide the hurt in my voice. "You've been seeing someone, Laura, a bouncer at the Pulse. How could you do this to us?" Her eyes widened, and I could see the realization of her actions wash over her. I never meant for you to find out like this," she stammered, her voice trembling. "It was a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "A mistake?" I echoed, incredulous. "You've been lying to me. You've been sneaking around behind my back. And you call it a mistake." "I was lonely," she shot back, her voice rising. "You've been so consumed with work, and I felt neglected. I didn't think it would go this far." Her words struck me like a slap. I had dedicated myself to building a stable life for us, working long hours to provide for our future. But in doing so, I had neglected the emotional connection we once shared. I felt the anger bubbling up inside me, but I forced myself to remain calm. "So you thought cheating was the answer. You thought that would solve anything." "I know it was wrong," she cried, tears welling in her eyes. "But I felt so alone. I thought I could find some happiness, even if it was just temporary. I never wanted to hurt you." The pain in her voice was genuine, and for a moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But then I remembered Jake, the man who had invaded our lives and shattered my trust. "What about him? Did you love him? Was this just some fling, or was there something deeper?" She shook her head vehemently. "No, it was never about love. It was a stupid mistake, a moment of weakness. I swear it meant nothing." I couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and sorrow. "And yet here we are. You've betrayed everything we built together. How can I trust you again?" Laura reached across the table, her eyes pleading. "I'm so sorry. I want to make this work. I love you, and I'll do whatever it takes to fix this. Please just give me a chance." Her words hung in the air like a fragile promise. I wanted to believe her, to feel that spark of hope rekindle within me, but the sting of betrayal was still fresh. I thought of my plan to take down Jake, to ruin his life for what he had done. But now, sitting across from Laura, I realized that my actions could have dire consequences for her as well. "Do you want to stay with him?" I asked, my voice low and steady. "No," she exclaimed, shaking her head. "I want to be with you. I made a terrible choice, and I regret it every day. Please, let's work through this together." I felt the weight of her words, but my mind was still clouded with anger and uncertainty. "How can I trust you again, Laura? How do I know you won't do this again?" She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the table. "I don't know. I'll have to earn your trust back, but I promise I'll do everything I can." At that moment, I realized that my quest for revenge had become entangled with my feelings for her. I had wanted to hurt Jake for what he had done, but now I saw that hurting him would only deepen the chasm between Laura and me. I took a deep breath, my heart heavy with the weight of my decision. "I need time to think. I can't just forgive and forget, but I don't want to throw everything away either." Laura nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I understand. Just know that I love you and I'm willing to fight for us." As I watched her cry, I felt a pang of sympathy, mingled with the remnants of my anger. I had to make a choice, whether to continue down the path of revenge or to confront the complexities of our relationship head-on. I stood up, the tension in the room palpable. "I need to process this. I'll be in touch." As I walked away, I felt a mixture of relief and confusion. I had confronted Laura, but the path forward was still unclear. I had to decide whether to let go of my anger toward Jake or to let it consume me entirely. The confrontation had shaken me to my core, and I knew I had to choose wisely. The next steps I took would determine not only my future, but also the future of my marriage. The days that followed were a blur of emotions. I vacillated between anger, hurt, and a deep-seated longing for the love I once knew with Laura. I had confronted her about the affair, and now I was faced with the daunting task of navigating the aftermath. The confrontation had left me with more questions than answers, and I found myself grappling with the complexities of our relationship. I took time away from work, needing space to think. The city felt different now, as if the very streets I walked on were tainted by the betrayal. I avoided the Pulse, the club, that had come to symbolize the fracture in my marriage. Each time I thought of Jake, my blood boiled, but I also felt a sense of confusion. Was I still committed to my plan for revenge? Laura reached out frequently, her texts filled with apologies and declarations of love. I wanted to respond, to reassure her that I was still here, but the anger I felt toward her betrayal clouded my judgment. I was caught in a web of conflicting emotions, unable to determine whether to pursue my vengeful instincts or to embrace the possibility of healing. Finally, after a week of reflection, I decided to meet with Laura again. We chose a quiet cafe, a place that had been special to us in happier times. As I walked in, I spotted her sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. She looked up as I approached, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and trepidation. "Hey," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Hey," I replied, taking a seat across from her. The weight of the moment pressed down on us, and I felt a knot in my stomach. "I've thought a lot about what happened." "I have too," she said quickly, her eyes pleading. "I want to fix this. I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." I took a deep breath, the tension in the air palpable. "I know you're sorry and I can see that you want to change, but trust is hard to rebuild, Laura. I need to know that this won't happen again." "I promise," she said, her voice trembling. "I never meant to hurt you. I was foolish and I regret every moment of it. I want to focus on us, on our future." Her words struck a chord within me. I wanted to believe her, but the memories of her betrayal lingered like shadows. "What if I told you I had plans to take action against Jake?" I asked, watching her reaction carefully. Her expression shifted, a flicker of fear crossing her features. "What do you mean?" "I was going to use my connections to make his life difficult. I wanted him to pay for what he did to us," I admitted, feeling a mix of shame and resolve. "Please don't do that," she pleaded, her voice rising. "I don't want you to become someone you're not. Revenge won't fix anything. It'll only make things worse." I considered her words, the weight of them sinking in. I had been consumed by my anger, blinded by the desire for retribution. "But he hurt us, Laura. He disrupted our lives." "I know," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "But I don't want to lose you to this anger. I want to move forward. We have to focus on healing, not on revenge." Her plea resonated within me. I had been so focused on punishing Jake that I had neglected to consider the impact it would have on my relationship with Laura. I didn't want to become a man driven solely by vengeance. I wanted to reclaim my life, but I needed to do it in a way that honored the love we once shared. "Okay," I said, my voice steady. "I won't go after him, but I need you to understand that trust will take time to rebuild. I need you to be patient with me." "I will," she promised, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I'll do whatever it takes. I love you and I'm committed to making this work." As we sat there, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me. The road ahead would be difficult, but I was willing to try. I realized that love was not just about trust. It was about forgiveness, healing, and the willingness to face the challenges together. In that moment, I decided to let go of my anger, to free myself from the burden of revenge. I would focus on rebuilding what had been lost, on finding a way to reconnect with Laura. It wouldn't be easy, but I was determined to try. As we left the cafe, I felt a sense of clarity wash over me. I had confronted Jake in my mind, but now it was time to confront my own feelings and choices. I was ready to embrace the complexities of love and trust, to navigate the uncertain waters of rebuilding our relationship. And as I walked side by side with Laura, I felt a sense of resolve. We would face this together, and together we would find a way to heal.